All right, I'm Mike Netzer here with David Liggett. This is HawkPodcast 29. We're continuing our series through data center fundamentals. This is part 2, talking about what is colocation. Next. All right, Dave, well, before we get started, I thought it'd be fun to share with our listening audience. One of the things we've been doing here with the team is every week we have a competition, and there's a category, and whoever wins the previous week is to be the judge for the current week.
That's
I
right.
thought it would be fun to share what those contests have been, and specifically your entry into each of the contests.
Oh, specifically my entry?
Yeah, specifically your entry, because I think it gives some good insight into the mind of David Liggett.
I love that. And so, yeah, we have a competitive, I like competitive environments, and we try to do that in some really great ways and also some really maybe light ways. And so I would call this light competitiveness.
Yeah, I sometimes think of it as like,
although it brings out
if you had like a
competitor in
pen
me.
Full of starving hyenas and you just like took a big hunk of meat and chucked it in the middle of it. That is what you do with our team. You give the Amazon gift card, very generous of you, and you incent people to reveal embarrassing things about themselves.
Right. It's mainly just, it's just for my benefit.
Anyways, so first let's start easy. Favorite food. And let me just say one more thing. The intent of these conversations is to foster.
I feel like
it's to foster team togetherness.
Yes.
And there is a legitimate beneficial purpose to this, which is good.
Okay.
And we appreciate you taking lead on this, by the way.
Okay, so favorite food, that wasn't the category actually. Remember, it was like most.
Oh yeah,
it was
so
a food category, but
I was going to preface that by saying
most
like
surprising food that you eat.
Yes, and so some of these we did like favorite movie. Yes. Actually, I didn't have them there, but the part of the intent is that it reveals something about you.
Yeah, you
like
bet.
Favorite food, chocolate milk, or pizza.
Yes,
that didn't reveal a lot about you.
So
some of it is things that let us know something about you.
Yeah.
All right. So favorite food that you like that you don't think a lot of other people like.
Thanks. Green beans.
Green beans. Okay.
Next one.
Moving on.
Thank you.
All right. Favorite movie, and I really would
podcast
like
is already
to
off
have
track.
part of if you could recreate the impassioned promotion that you gave this movie in the actual competition.
One of my favorite movie ever is Braveheart, and I think it has a story for everyone in there. So I think there is the guy side of me. I like the long. I don't know if
hair.
What's that?
Hair.
The long hair. I like the historical. I like that it's based loosely on a true story. I like that he's fighting for an ideal for his country. I like that.
Accents are pretty cool too.
That's right. There's a love story for the ladies. So anyway, I just that would be my favorite movie.
Our favorite
and I'm still
movie,
trying
Braveheart.
to get. I will tell you, there's one person on our team that has never seen this movie. Actually,
I believe it.
And I have asked this said person. I've said, hey, we'll shut down work for a day so that you will watch.
We will do a screening.
Yes, and still that person will not watch it. So if she's,
I can't think of a better way to watch that
She's
movie
listening.
than on our poorly lit projector with computer audio.
That's right.
That's
Okay.
really the intended consumption.
Right.
All right, favorite band.
Oh, I did.
Do you remember what you did? Switchfoot? Yes.
Yeah. So
I Dare You to Move.
that's right.
Their hit song from 1999.
Yes.
All right, your favorite T-shirt. Do you remember this one? I don't remember what you had.
Waco. VTEX.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yes,
Thank you,
thank
Rhett.
you. VTEX Barbecue
VTEX
in
Barbecue,
Waco.
yes.
They produce the gut pack. If you're from Baylor, you know exactly what this is. And I think Mike was the judge on that one. And I said to Mike I would use part of the proceeds to drive him to Waco to eat some of that, and I still did not get
As
picked.
tempting as that was, we do need to say why Rhett won. Rhett had
Right.
I can't remember the exact phrasing of it, but it said, my favorite type of leg day, my kind of leg day, and it was a turkey leg.
Yes.
And then so it was a CrossFit joke, point 1. It was about eating, point 2, and it had a pun, point 3. So Rhett that's an all-timer, sure. And then what does the back say?
Beast mode.
Oh, yeah, feast mode. So great.
So strong.
So great.
So strong. That was good.
That is one
Well
of the
done.
greatest shirts maybe ever.
Yeah, I think it's time for Rhett to either wear a microphone on these
What was we talking about?
conversations.
Did you add that for yourself?
Oh, good.
It'll be
Okay.
low quality, but it'll be all right. I'll be on it.
All right. Okay. Favorite drink?
I did green, lemon lime Gatorade.
Lemon lime Gatorade.
For a lot of reasons we won't get into.
Sure. A favorite vacation spot?
I did St. Bart's.
Oh yeah.
So that was
that's a little bougie.
It is, but
you had to have been drinking Topo.
That's
I mean, I don't
Topo
feel like
I don't know if Topo was around. This is where I went on my honeymoon. So this is 17, 18 years ago, and I don't know if Topo was around then.
All right.
So
I'll give you a pass there.
Thank you. I'm sure I was drinking.
By the way, I've got
bougie.
Grapefruit Spindrift. This is delicious.
Yeah.
It's a good solid, not too bougie drink option.
That's right.
Water. All right, last one. All right, second to last. Candy. Favorite candy.
I did Sour Patch Kids.
Yes, you did. That's such an. I think most people will find of all those facts the most interesting about you is that you are a Sour Patch Kid. Like
I love sour candy.
Yeah,
it's good.
Love it.
Good and good for you.
All right, and then last, we're gonna really try and get Rhett to bring this in to the to flash this up in the final version is awkward high school photo.
This is one that I won apparently.
You won, but
But I think it's more just because it was like a picture of it was an awkward picture.
Well, it was a good story, and it was
an
awkward picture.
And it was my senior year of high school, and I had longer hair, and it was like bleached blonde, and it was
the consensus
awful.
amongst the team is that you looked like a cross between the two older brothers from Home Improvement. Jonathan Taylor Thomas,
That's
JTT.
good.
Everybody knows JTT,
Yes.
and then the older
One
one,
of
who
them
everybody always forgets his name,
Yes.
but they kind of look like a mashup between the two.
The bigger one it was kind of his
He did
hair.
have the hair that was
Yes,
like the
parted down
middle
the
part.
Oh,
yeah.
God, so awful.
I know we're contractually obligated to mention CrossFit despite all the controversy, but you and I both share. Mine started to heal. You have kettlebell finger. I've got some kettlebell finger going
KB
on.
finger, yeah, right
It's
there.
a rash from all the kettlebells we did whenever Monday or something.
Yeah, I got that, and yes.
You got all sorts of ailments and maladies.
Yes.
All right,
Nick
so that's
that.
fun. Again, it's just a little thing we can do to keep fostering team togetherness.
Yeah, and this is actually
everything that's going
I
on.
would say if you're leading a team, this has been really fun. And it's probably been a highlight. Maybe some people have a lot of highlights from like working from home in this season. I think this season has obviously been hard in a lot of different ways. So this has been a fun way for our team to stay connected, share things that are appropriate about one another that are fun to know. And I certainly have enjoyed it. It's been fun.
It has, but it does underscore the fact that you're not just going to fall. You're not going to back into this. You have to be intentional. You put a little bit of time and thought. And again, it seems silly, but even picking the categories is fun and kind of a challenge because you want it to be, again, something where you're learning something about your coworkers.
So next week is favorite
book.
Week's favorite book.
Favorite book, I'm the judge.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, so again, before we jump in, so today we're talking about what is colocation and just helping people understand the concept of colocation. Before we do that, one fun little data center fact. This is, again, if you're new to the industry, these things are fun. If you've been in a while, you probably take them for granted, but it's still really cool. It's talking about the history of some of the more iconic or important buildings in the data center industry. So this one, is 60 Hudson Street, which is one of the main internet connection hubs in New York City and on the East Coast as a whole. I mean, it's really one of the most well-connected buildings in the entire world. But it got its start. It was built back in 1930. It was built by Western Union, and it was going to be like their main telegraph hub. So in some ways, the data center of the 30s.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Some fun facts about the building is like it's built with 19 different shades of brick. So it goes from darker to lighter as you go up. Just a fun little fact. But anyway, so then they moved out in the 70s and telecom started to move in. And then after that, the data center company started to move in until today. Again, it's a huge interconnection hub.
Carrier Hotel, these facilities, and we've done a podcast on it and talked about it before, but these facilities are, because of their historical ecosystem, they're so unique and so important, to your point, in the data center landscape as a whole. So these are fun, and they all have a very interesting story.
They do, and we talked about the Nabisco building. It's also in New York City. It goes back to the 1880s, and first Oreo ever made there is now I think a Google data center. Anyways, but you're right. In a lot of these,
111 East 8th
nobody
Avenue.
set out to make a Carrier Hotel in the 30s. They didn't know what it was.
Just happens.
It just happened. And some of these, by the time anybody realized how valuable they were, they're so ingrained in the ecosphere that they're just nearly impossible to dislodge.
Yeah, and if you're jumping into the industry right now, I mean, these are buildings that traditionally have a lot of telecom and connectivity to them. a lot of different network cloud providers there, and also, colocation providers will want to have presences in these buildings so that their customers can connect specifically to that, infrastructure in that facility. So.
Yeah, so really cool Western Union building in New York, 60 Hudson Street. It's like a trapezoidal also. The architecture backstory is also fun.
Yes.
All right, so today we're in part 2 of our podcast series that is a companion to our blog series that we did on data center fundamentals.
Yes.
Last time we did what is a data center?
Yes.
Great to be able to answer that question with sure knowledge.
Yep.
Today we're talking about what is colocation. So just explain the concept of how companies lease space from other companies for their digital infrastructure. So off the top of your head, what is colocation?
Yes. It is when a company leases digital infrastructure from a data center operator. And there's a history behind it. I mean, the basic understanding of this is companies did this for a long time by themselves. And there's inherent challenges when you do that. Technology changes, you acquire a company. I mean, there's all these different things that create issues with doing it yourself. And so back in like 07, 08, 09, the market really shifted. And data center owners or operators started doing this in a much more mature fashion. So this was not just a cobbled together, hey, we've got 4 facilities that we've just kind of bought, and now we're offering colocation. It was a very structured business model. They were building it in a very industrialized fashion. So it looked the same and felt the same in all these different markets. And that really created this colocation market that we're in today.
All right, so let's talk about, company A. They've got some digital infrastructure in-house, maybe a couple different servers spread across the country. Talk through the high-level timeline that they would go through from the first time they decide, hey, we need to move this to an offsite, we're going to outsource this, through the final move-in with the colocation facility.
Yeah, the first thing those companies have to understand is what do we have, which is a process you have to run internally to understand really what you're using that for. Because if you go to relocate or consolidate data center infrastructure from 1 to 5, however many locations into one, the first thing that a great data center operator or provider will ask you is, hey, what are you using this for? Because they have done this. It might be your first time, second time, third time to do this. They do this every day, all the time, with financial companies, healthcare companies, technology, all this. So you got to know what you have. And then 2, it's probably on the faster side, 4 to 6 months. On the longer side, up to 12 to 18 months to really go through the process well, so that your company's set up, in the future for success. So it takes time. It's costly, and it's not something you want to get wrong. You got to get it right, because if you don't do it right, you'll pay the price, not just then, but years from now.
Sure. So they've got, once they kind of have an understanding of what their current setup is, needs, etc.
Yes.
Next steps are.
Yeah, so you'll typically, figure out a geography you want to be in. If you decide that cloud is not for you, which we'll talk about in one of our future podcasts as it relates to this fundamental series, but if you decide that it makes sense to have physical servers and racks of gear in a data center facility, you want to figure out where you needed to be from a geography perspective. It does matter based on what the applications are serving. So you're going to have to find out, hey, who are the people or the businesses that I could do this deal with, and what facility makes sense for me to go in. What are the compliance and infrastructure requirements that we have to meet to make sure that this meets our business needs, and our chief information officer, our chief financial officer can get comfortable with the money that we'll spend and the security needed, all those things. So you've got to go out and kind of define the universe, figure out who you want to do that with, and then move forward from there. And then it's a sales process on their side. So you issue RFPs and you get proposals back, and you compare apples to apples what they're offering, which is a process and a challenge, and then you down select from there and figure out who to go with.
Yeah. So talk about the bids or the quotes process, as far as what's on those that's going to be different than maybe if someone's used to an office lease or an industrial lease, that they're that's going to be unique to a co-location lease.
Yeah, I mean, one is just, very simple, is just like site access and understanding how, are you in if you're a smaller, if you have 5 cabinets, are you in a caged environment that's just yours, or are you in a locked cabinet environment that's open to everyone that walks into a data hall? So just understanding things like that, understanding redundant whips and or redundant infrastructure. This is something that if you're joining the industry, one of the things you'll hear some people talk about is retail colocation and wholesale colocation, and all that. There's some different ways to define all that, but just think retail colocation, smaller requirements, wholesale colocation, bigger requirements, and all smaller companies have different requirements and bigger companies have different requirements. Now we there's a whole other section of the colocation market which has to do with hyperscale requirements, and these are really big power requirements that are being done in markets across the world. So, but you will see things back like, hey, what is the infrastructure? What is the redundancy of the UPS systems, the generators, the cooling equipment within a data center facility? You'll see things like a service level agreements to be communicated. What is the data center operator telling you that they will guarantee to you, and what are the ramifications if they don't guarantee that? You'll see a price per kW per month typically. People need to know if is the electricity cost included in that, or is it in addition to that? These are all real costs that companies will have to pay. So just understanding the financial and economic agreements that you're making is really important. And different providers have different costs they're willing to to communicate on those proposals. So it's economics, it's infrastructure, it's legalese, and that typically comes in like more of the lease or the master services agreement than it does in the proposal. But those are all the type of things that you're looking to understand.
Yeah, and take a step back for a second and talk about, what's typically the triggering event that's going to cause a company to make the move from in-source to outsource digital infrastructure?
Outdated technology. So, hardware refreshes can cause a company to go, you know what, do we want to buy all this again? Or do we want to do this in another format? So just technology change. So that's one thing. To any type of like service disruption, network outage, power outage internally, all eyes are looking in going, hey, why did this happen? And do we have an environment that it makes sense to continue to do this within? Or wait a minute, we have Fortune 500 companies and Fortune 1000 companies that are doing this with other people. So an unfortunate event can cause that to happen. I would say company changes, acquiring other companies. So as an example, if you have, 3 office locations across the U.S. and you have a small data center component in each of them, and you acquire another company that has 1 data center location, and you can consolidate those 3 into that or do something else that's more effective, that can happen too. So just general business changes, but all those are good examples of why companies are evaluating this. I mean, your a company's IT infrastructure plan has to be like constantly evaluated because things are always changing. And if you put a plan in place and you think it's going to last you 5, 10, 15 years of business, either you have a very definable business for a long period of time, or you're not looking at the changes that could impact the market and impact your solution to your customers.
All right, so you mentioned a second ago price per kW per month.
Yes.
Being how these leases are typically defined. So I think it's important to understand, what does that mean? And when you sign a lease for 10 kW or 100 kW
sure.
or a megawatt, what does that mean as far as the potential versus actually used power, et cetera?
Yeah, this is one of the biggest challenges for people coming over from the traditional commercial real estate side of things into the data center industry. Commercial real estate side of things, everything is based off the square footage. If you're doing an office lease, it's square foot per year. If you're doing it or month, I think we've talked about this in other podcasts, but this is when you sign a lease with a data center operator for colocation, you are signing to have access to a certain amount of infrastructure that you can use. And so there is a price per kW, kilowatt, per month charge that you will pay for that infrastructure. That is how the lease or master services agreement is going to be set up. If the deal,
But I think that there is a loose analogy to an office space where you're going to lease one floor of a building, 10,000 square feet, and if you put 2 people in there or 100 people in there, you're paying for that.
Absolutely.
And so there's some of an analogy that makes sense at some level.
Yes. Yeah. And there's also with your electricity. So that's that what I mentioned before, that price per kW per month. That's one thing. Then you have your electricity that traditionally, as you get bigger and like the wholesale deals, is on top of that. So that is it's a combination of how many hours are in a month, the PUE, the efficiency of the facility, and the electricity cost that the data center operator has contracted with whoever the power provider is. And those three things get you the price that you're going to pay for the electricity that you use. So your lease could be for 100 kW, but you might only use 25 kW, which is what you would pay on the electricity.
Sure.
So that's the way that the general breakdown takes place as it relates to like leasing infrastructure. It's a very interesting, believe me, it's not rocket science, but it's a very interesting component to this market and how it's changed over time.
Yeah, and that's a piece that I'm probably a little bit less familiar with. So, your needs, if you look at, again, part of the taking inventory is you're understanding, what are our needs going to be throughout the month, and they're going to go up and down, right? So if you sign a 100 kW lease, what would that reveal about what they think their actual usage is going to be? Because they probably don't think it's going to be at 100.
It can't be.
Because they don't want it to go over.
Yeah, it can't be.
And that's again a whole nother something you got to solve for in the lease agreement. But so if you're signing a 100 kW lease, what do you think their actual usage is typically going to be?
Yeah, typically the data center operator will ballpark when they let someone sign a 100 kW lease. They'll ballpark that from anywhere from like 60 to 80% of utilization. So there's some providers out there that are probably laughing because they know that there's been users that have over provisioned themselves. Mm-hmm. So they might lease 100 kW, but they're only using 20. And that's one of the strange things about our space. It is hard to add more over time for different reasons. And so you want to make sure that you are looking at the future enough from a power perspective that you have that capacity basically reserved so that you can use it. So anywhere from 60 to 80%, I would say, is a appropriate planned utilization rate, even though that's probably not what most groups utilize.
I'm trying to find, I think it was podcast 13. Yes, it was podcast 13 where we talked about challenges facing the end user.
Yeah.
16 podcasts ago. Unbelievable.
We've come so far.
Go, what a run we're on. But I think you spend some more time on that specific piece in that. So podcast 13, check it out. All right, so great. So that's very helpful, I think, to understand how these things are signed. But at the end of the day, it can be a little bit of a guessing game. And I think we talked about in that last podcast about how you want, as you're an end user, you want to write as much flexibility into the lease as you can. If you're the operator, you want them to sign 100. If they're only using 20. But okay, so talk about the different sizes of leases from retail, wholesale, hyperscale, and kind of how those are typically operated or signed or structured.
Yes. Okay, these are generalizations. So there's people on here that if you've been listening to our podcast and we talk about like in the weeds of the space like we are.
It's fundamentals. This is a 101 level course.
You'll have
this
some
is not
HSOs
a
about this, but
yes.
Okay.
But
so
if you got the HSOs, by all means, just drop them in the comments. David will respond to them.
Hot Sports Opinions. That's what the HSO stands for. So think this: retail colocation, small; wholesale colocation, bigger; hyperscale, largest.
So you got like convenience store, Costco. What's the biggest? I don't. Warehouse, actual warehouse.
Sure.
Forklift.
Yes. So the retail side, I would say, let's say 0 to 50 cabinets, just to be, so 0 to 250 kW of power that is used in that requirement. The wholesale space, you could say, is 250 kW to, I would say 2, 3, 4 megawatts. Okay. And this is the space that back in 08, 09, 2010 really started to grow because of some of the capital market challenges. Companies with big needs decided they didn't want to do this themselves anymore. And there was a financial equation that you could look at over a 10-year period that it just made more sense to lease this infrastructure than it did to do it yourself. And then what we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years is large companies, so let's say 5 megawatts plus, 5 to 10 meg plus deals out in the market that have redefined the industry. And you've had a lot of focus on about 20 companies that are doing work in this like hyperscale space. And this would be the big tech companies, international companies that are growing social media brands. I mean, these are the type of companies that have these big needs and that's the hyperscale category. So from a size perspective, that's where it would be from a power standpoint.
Yeah, and again, if you can, just kind of understand what would be like a typical customer in each of those bands. You start with retail. You mentioned the hyperscale.
Yeah, I would say on the retail side, think of like a small healthcare company. That's a good example. I would say in the wholesale range, think of a mature financial company that goes, hey, I have security needs. I need autonomous I need infrastructure that only I control or only is allowed access to me. And then on the hyperscale side, large tech companies that are doing massive things globally.
Yes. It's the scale of some of these deals are pretty mind-blowing.
Oh, it is.
Talking like 20, 30 meg deals.
Yeah.
Where, again, that's megawatts.
Yeah.
So of power, that's, it's small cities worth of power.
Yeah.
That just so we can watch our cat videos.
Sure. Got to have them.
Got to have the cat videos. And so, again, this is probably it's entirely its own podcast, but, talk a little bit about colocation versus cloud and
Yes.
what those things mean. And then, how companies are splitting up workloads and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, typically, think colocation, I actually have like a physical presence in a specific data center. I know exactly where that is. Cloud, I have a presence in a region, with a data center, with a cloud provider that I don't have to, I have not physically bought a server cabinet and servers that I've actually put into a data center. Like I'm basically leasing that infrastructure in a way that I don't have to, that's not in a colocation facility. It's with a cloud provider. So from an infrastructure perspective, that's an easy, hopefully, understanding of, you can get, more detailed on the technical side, but that's like an infrastructure understanding of the difference between colocation and cloud. But, the advantages of colocation are, there's more flexibility there today than there's ever been before. But some of the disadvantages are that, you do still have to buy the gear.
Yeah, so there's a bit of a CapEx,
you bet.
component there.
Yeah, so less than you owning it, because you're not owning the UPS systems and the things that you need to own to produce that for your own company. But there is people that are still in that middle zone of, we can't just put everything into cloud. It just doesn't make sense for what our business needs are, et cetera. And that's one of the things that we certainly have seen the cloud market grow. But, I think it's not taking all the colocation market away. And in fact, it's only adding to the larger colocation market. So it's an interesting, cloud and colocation have an interesting relationship. And I think if I think about what are going to be the biggest stories in our space in the next 5 years, will be how that relationship grows.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, what we've heard, or maybe I've heard, and surely you've heard, is, and again, this makes me think back to the end user podcast we did about how a good, CIO or whoever's running the project will get all the stakeholders involved. It's a financial decision.
Yeah.
It's a technology. It's a strategic decision. But I think, seem the cloud is really good salespeople. And I think you might have seen is the CIO is hey, we got to be in the cloud.
Yeah.
And maybe that's not the most informed position, but they just think, hey, got to be in the cloud. It makes most sense. Yeah. Connectivity everywhere. And like you said, I think it's going to be a pendulum swing over the next few years. So we will watch with bated breath. All right, Dave, well, great thoughts as always. Again, if you are new to the space, check out the Fundamentals blog series. And we're going to continue to do these podcasts as well. So if you've got topics you want us to cover, shoot us a note. I'm sure you can find us. If you're watching this, you can get us on social media or what have you. So stay tuned for the next one.